What is the worst thing that has ever happened to you in a relationship? He died, waking up in the middle of the night and seeing he was very unwell, calling for an ambulance while fruitlessly trying to wake him, seeing paramedics start CPR and knowing that life won't be the same, having to ring his family and explain what had happened, making the decision to remove life support. It was all unimaginably awful. Story 2. I had been sleeping with this really weird chick for a couple of weeks. I had a friend sell me some acid and I took it. It kicked in and I was flying pretty high. I went to go pee and noticed a red bump in that area. I could also see it actively spreading. The acid. So I freaked out a bit and asked the chick what she gave me. That led into a really awkward debate while I'm still tripping and not able to really process the situation. I end up leaving to hang out with the friend. I told him about what I had found and he told me to show him what it was. So I drop the drawers and he starts laughing. Not because of the size, he got that laugh years prior, but because it was an ingrown hair near the base. That relationship was near its end anyway. She was a lot of fun, but that type of situation on acid isn't fun. Story 3. She left her hard drive plugged into my computer. She had been insisting that I had been cheating for months and I suspected she was projecting, so I looked. She was sleeping around in my bed. I had to call her dad to come get her because she would not leave my house. She got mad after I broke up with her because she got an STD and I didn't. So she put my stuff in my gas tank. Just effing awful all around. Story 4. Herpes scare where he treated me like I had the plague until my test results came back. Wouldn't even sit near me or touch anything I had touched, cooked, etc. I tested negative twice. He then tested and was positive and thought nothing of it. In other words, he treated me exactly opposite of how he did when he thought I might be positive. Story 5. He ended things out of the blue. He had previously said he wanted to marry me. We'd started planning a life together. I'd never been happier in my life with someone, never felt so sure about something. It devastated me. I'd felt in my bones that he was it. I haven't felt that way about anyone since, and it's been 10 years. It took a while to process, if I'm honest, years. I don't miss him or love him anymore, I just wish I could have had what he took from me. Story 6. Broken up with shortly after losing my job due to a terrible car accident putting me out of work. We lived together nearing the end of our lease, and she left me to take care of her dog and stress about where I'm going to live and how I'm going to make ends meet. Had support from a few friends, one in particular who would check up on me and hang out with me while I drank myself to death. I pleaded with her in desperation to take me back, and she did. Then, after a drunk night at my apartment, woke up to her coming home and telling me she slept with that very friend that was keeping tabs on me that night. Then found out she was sleeping with him the whole time. She broke up with me to relieve herself of the guilt and likely had tons of overlaps she didn't disclose. Absolute worst year of my whole life. Story 7. The worst thing? Getting ghosted after thinking everything was going great. One day you're texting and making plans and then suddenly, radio silence. No explanation, no closure, it's like you didn't even exist. The whole thing just messes with your head and makes you question everything. That was rough. Story 8. The worst thing for me was realizing that I had been giving everything, only to find out they weren't even trying. It's painful when you put in so much effort, but the other person is just emotionally checked out. Story 9. Was supposed to fly back from a trip on my birthday. She stayed an extra night, came home, and had cheated on me. We lived together, so I stayed in another bedroom while I could hear her on the phone with the guy she cheated with who lived across the country. The calls were frequent and lasted a while. I drank myself silly and eventually moved out when an opportunity presented itself. We had been together for like 4 years at that time. Story 10. One of my exes broke up with me by ghosting out of nowhere. He blocked my number and my social media too. There wasn't even a fight or argument that led up to it. No goodbye or breakup messages. It took me almost a week to realize what actually happened because he was already a sporadic texter. But whatever. I was bummed and I eventually moved on. Jump ahead to maybe 5 months later and I'm dating a new guy. One day I get a text from my ex asking if we could go out to name restaurant. More than a little annoyed, I sent back a snarky response. I think you were supposed to send that to the other girl. He insisted that it was meant for me. I hated that he acted as though we were still together and he didn't just up and ghost me for several months. It was like he thought he could press pause on the relationship, then come back whenever to hit play and everything would be the same. He was genuinely shocked that I was in a new relationship, like I was supposed to be in stasis or something until he got back. Oh, and his explanation for the months of ghosting? Just some nonsense about how he wanted some time alone to focus on himself. Story 11. She broke up with me to be my friend. Then her mom shot my friend because he was high and acting aggressive. Then I started dating her again. Lasted a year, and it was terrible. Edit. She just called me one day crying that her mom shot him. He didn't die, so I was there for her, and we moved in together. We eventually realized it wasn't going to work and we can't live together. We made bad choices regularly, but I've been single for over a year, learning how to be an adult in a relationship. Story 12. My wife left me for a good friend of ours. This good friend was very charismatic, but also pretty terrible. He bragged about his past exploits and felt the most pride when it included breaking up a couple only to dump the girl. We both were horrified by these stories, yet somehow it did not dissuade my wife, and we became the next couple he broke up. That was the worst, and I have not been the same since. Story 13. Partner cheated on me with a really good friend at the time, doubting myself ever since. So I choose to be single now due to the major trust issues. I know not everyone will cheat, but I can't get too close to anyone because of the psychological damage that person's actions left on me. Story 14. We are in the current process of leaving a cult we were both born in, and we are slowly peeling back the layers of harm and abuse. Due to the nature of the cult, men were higher valued than women, and as the wife, I've endured years of verbal, emotional, and sometimes physical abuse. I also had my role to play and was not an ideal wife. Together, we are healing and apologizing. So far, it is going well. Story 15. I was physically abused, gave me a concussion multiple times, called the cops on me and had me arrested just because I scratched up his face while trying to defend myself. Meanwhile, my entire body was covered in bruises. It took me way too long to finally escape his madness due to him constantly threatening me and my family. Filed a restraining order and ran. Now I can smell a red flag from miles away. Story 16. Love of my life lost his mind and started accusing me of being in adult films. Nope. Cheating. Nope. Doing shady deals with a group of people I've never met. Nope. Having a mole removed to not be recognized in said adult films, but it grew back. Nope. That I drugged him to try and unalive him. Nope again. That everything I say is scripted by this group of unknown folks in an attempt to gaslight him and get him committed. No. And a plethora of other things. This guy was the love of my life, and I'm reeling right now. The people who know me well are in shock that anyone, let alone the love of my life, would ever think I'd do these things. Heartbreaking, really. Story 17. Unbeknownst to me, the girl I was dating had links to organized crime in our city. She used to supplement her income with some coke dealing and organizing escorts for guys. We had a big argument over the phone. She got drunk and fell down the stairs in her house. She called up her friends and told them that I'd pushed her, so they came over to sort me out. Fortunately, or unfortunately, they got the wrong house and attacked my neighbor. The police were called and multiple arrests were made. The police later raided my girlfriend's house. Large quantities of drugs were found and she ended up doing time. In 2013, she crashed her car while out of her mind on booze and cocaine and was pronounced dead at the scene. Holy smokes, I was gonna say be careful who you date, but be careful who you live next to. Story 18. My ex took drugs at a rave. I only got drunk. Went to a city 4 hours away to the rave with the crew. He became violent and erratic. It was bizarre. Anyways, drove him home. The entire time he was saying voices were telling him to hurt me and essay me, etc., the whole way back home. Drove him to his grandpa's house, and then he chased me and announced he was going to beat me. I called his parents and my mom, crying. My mom came and the neighbors called the cops. Like 8 cop cars came, an ambulance tackled him, took him to the mental ward, diagnosed him with type 2 bipolar mood disorder. I was on the phone with my friends I went with, begging them to tell me if he was on drugs. They cracked and said he took MDMA. I told his parents and the hospital/paramedics. His mega religious parents blamed me for putting drugs into their boy. Mind you, he was 25 and a 220-pound beast. I was 22 and 120 pounds. I told him what happened because he didn't remember. He wanted to get back together. He never corrected his parents and was excited to invite me to a family wedding as long as I apologized to his parents for what I did, specifically his mom. I was so done. I broke up with him on the spot. I know it sounds so evil to admit I relished in his ugly crying and all the confusion. This was 2 years after the event and dealing with his parents constantly berating me. I was so done with his excuses for his parents saying I was the devil. Story 19. My ex knowingly brought bed bugs into my apartment and lied to me about it. He did a ton of other horrible abusive crap, but the bed bugs cost me thousands of dollars and multiple rounds of fumigating, living with my clothes and trash bags mattressless for months. Story 20. I went on a date 13 years ago where I didn't have the money to pay, but at midnight we were to be paid. I was banking on the notion that I would have the money before I paid the check at midnight. I didn't get the money until 4 a.m. the next day, and she had to pay on our first date. I paid her back in cash the next day at work. We worked together, and we've been married for 10 years now. So the worst thing that's ever happened to this guy is finding true love. Story 21. Was early high school, joking around with my father, horrid temper. Switch flipped with him. He chased me down the hallway. I thought we were playing till he pinned me down, hand around my throat, strangling me till I passed out. Burst blood vessels in my eyes, had to wear sunglasses for a good week to hide them while at work or elsewhere. Story 22. Went to a dispensary and they only took cash. They were about to close and the ATM was down at the street. My boyfriend offered the dispensary owner to keep me locked in their establishment as collateral so he could run down the street to the ATM. He never came back. I smoked a blunt with the owner though and called an Uber home. We never spoke again. Story 24. I met my now ex-wife in 2018. And we married in 2022. The high point of a loving, fun, happy relationship. In 2023, she had a burst of success in her career as a stage actor, got a huge ego, and decided she could have whatever she wanted. So she started dating a female colleague of ours while we were, by her own admission, still happily married. Fell in love and decided she didn't want to be married to a man anymore. I went from happily kissing my wife every morning to realizing I needed to move out within a matter of days. This sucked, of course, but I'm not even getting started. Because this all went down while we were rehearsing for a stage show we were starring in opposite each other, by the time the show opened, it was clear our marriage was over. Every night, twice a night on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I had to go through a scene where her character aggressively berates me, often with the audience joining in, then she forgives me and we get married on stage. I did this 22 times while I knew my marriage was over. She was absolutely horrible about feeling out boundaries during this period, and not only did she bring her girlfriend to the show multiple times, they parked at a table right outside the dressing room, so the only way for me to get backstage was to walk by them or go straight through the audience. I was having uncontrollable crying fits and panic attacks between acts, and a couple of people even asked if I was abusive or cheating because they couldn't believe someone could be so vindictive. But she wasn't being vindictive. She's just a narcissist. And I was too shocked and traumatized to stick up for myself. On the last night of the show, I was freaking out and wishing I could just pilot my body like a mech suit and just stop feeling anything. And then it actually happened. My body was going to the right places, my voice was singing the right notes, but the world was so quiet. I could hear my heartbeat. It was honestly awesome, like my entire nervous system was finally giving me a break from being tortured for 2 weeks. I told my therapist about this, calling it my first flow state as a performer. She identified it as a dissociative episode, a symptom of PTSD. Then it happened a couple more times at different gigs and it was way less awesome. The whole thing was by far the worst experience of my life and it just kept going for 2.5 weeks until the show closed and I had to dive full steam into separating my life from the woman I was sure I'd grow old with. I hear she's been leaning hard into cosplaying as a lesbian by getting a hideous haircut, which has screwed up her casting prospects. She also managed to get fired from her job for being a generally awful NPD person. Story 26. Ex spread a rumor I was trying to get with her 14-year-old daughter. Ex had tried to off herself when we broke up, and a week or so later, her daughter tried to call me at 3 a.m. I woke up that morning and texted her, "What's up? Are you okay?" The mom took that as some creeper crap and spread said rumor. She has since apologized for that, but I left her on red. I'll forgive her when I die. Story 27. Partner's mother passes away from cancer and there's such a mess that I handle all the funeral arrangements. She claims emotional meltdown as justification to sleep around with randos, refuses therapy but accuses me of stealing her inheritance. Mom was flat broke. When I protest, invites an army deserter addict into our home and throws me out on the street. After blowing all the money on opiates, I had a nervous breakdown after that and was homeless for 18 months afterwards. Story 28. Abuse. He was very violent and essayed me, belittled me and isolated me from my family and friends. The cherry on top was when I finally had proof he cheated and broke up with him. He then showed up on my doorstep refusing to leave and proceeded to pin me on the bed and headbutt me in the face, breaking my nose. The most horrific 2 years of my life. Story 29. My ex said she felt bad for a guy who liked her, but she was dating me, so she fooled around with him a little bit. She told me almost immediately out of guilt, but that doesn't fix the problem. Also had an ex who kept telling me stories about her ex-husband, like she was pretty sure him and his buddy killed a guy but never knew for sure, or how he was a drug addict with lots of weapons and some of the worst rage she'd ever seen. About a week or two into us officially dating, she just up and disappears, stops texting, won't answer calls. Turns out her ex-husband needed a ride to get to rehab, and she wanted to help him out, but don't worry, I'm not going to get back together with him, she said. Well, you'll never guess what happened next. She got back together with him. Story 30. My ex used to gaslight me. Legit thought I was schizophrenic and almost checked myself into the hospital for it. He came home late one day, sat on the bed and told me he had relations with another man in a hotel nearby. I started crying. He went to take a shower, came back out of the shower and asked me what was going on. I told him what he said and his response was, "Are you feeling okay? You seem really confused lately, with all the love and concern in the world." He would also pick me up and throw me across the room. I was less than 100 pounds at the time because he would control what I ate. I went to the hospital to get a dislocated shoulder put back in place, and he was super intent on watching. He refused hospital trips for all shoulder dislocations after that and did it himself. He would also tell me that if I ever told anyone, he would unalive me and make it look like a self-unaliving. Thankfully, after an emergency protective order and a restraining order, I'm out of that, in a different state, and in an actual loving, healthy relationship. Story 31. My ex used to be in love with this girl he barely knew years before he was with me. He took her rejection hard, but I never knew the full extent of it until years later. A couple of years ago, days before my 30th birthday, he ran into her randomly. He then proceeded to text his friend things about how he's not over her, how good she looked, he's not attracted to me anymore, that he feels trapped in the relationship and wants to try things with her again, etc., and texted her as well. Meanwhile, it was completely one-sided and she hasn't even thought about him in years. Shortly after this happened, I found a letter in our home that he wrote years ago, right after they broke up, that was written to her that he never got rid of. It wasn't a nice letter about how much he loved her. No, it was an angry, graphically violent, hate-filled letter about how she's nothing more than a loser who deserves to die, and all the things in which he wanted to brutally unalive her. I couldn't believe that this was the person I'd been living with for the last 2 years. He tried to downplay it like it was no big deal, and was from a long time ago, and begged me not to tell her or anyone, which I stupidly listened until a year later, when I saw he was still following her on Instagram after I threatened to tell her if he even so much as looked in her direction ever again. We met up for coffee and I told her everything, exposing his secret, where she thanked me and proceeded to immediately block him on everything. It was an extremely healing moment for me. Story 32. We talked a lot about having children through the relationship. She told me what happened after we got married, bought her a huge ring, paid for the destination wedding, then it became after the honeymoon, 3 weeks in Europe, which I understood. Honeymoon was a solid 8 months after the wedding. Everything dried up after the wedding. The day after the honeymoon was over, she told me she didn't know if she wanted kids. We discussed this for another 5 months where she refused to decide. I told her finally she had to go live with her mother until she figured it out. She came back and told me that it wasn't that she didn't want kids, but that I would be a bad father. She then packed up her things and left. I think it was likely a combination of factors, but she was hoping the desire to have kids would grow, but it never did. Story 33. That would be when my then wife decided one day to pack up a suitcase and move 12 hours away. At the time, we had a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old. I was left to deal with the abandonment issues and heartache that the kids obviously had after that. At least she didn't try to take the kids with her. Story 34. She was angry I stayed up playing Red Dead Redemption 2 on release and called the cops and lied, saying I was threatening to kill her with a gun. Arrested, kids taken, kids abused in foster care, and divorce. That was all because of her control issues. Jeez, can't a brother just play a cowboy game without losing his whole family? Story 35. She cheated. I fell into depression. She filed for divorce, claiming that I couldn't be a parent to our children because of depression. Curiously, in her opinion, I was somehow healthy enough to work a ton of overtime though. This all means that she cheated, I don't get to see my kids that much, and I give her a lot of money each month as punishment. Story 36. He left me after I became disabled from giving birth to our son and I could no longer clean as I used to. In the marriage before that, my ex beat me while breastfeeding our daughter. But actually, this was less bad than being left because I'm not capable of cleaning like I used to. It really effed up with my head. It made me feel like he was only with me for my house labor. At least with the wife beater, it was obvious he was an a-hole. But I often read about wives that don't clean enough and everyone is always telling the men to leave and that they can do better. But I really just physically can't anymore. Story 37. Probably the worst thing that could happen is when you've been trusting someone for a long time, thinking everything is fine, and then one day you realize that both of you are being pulled in completely different directions. And it's not because of fights or betrayal, but just because you've both grown and changed. That can feel heavier than something like cheating because there's no one to blame but time and circumstances. It's like you've invested emotionally, built dreams and plans together, and then you realize the person next to you isn't the same anymore. And the sad part is, neither are you. It doesn't just break the relationship, but also the vision of the future you were building together. Letting go of someone you still love, but knowing you're not the same people anymore can be really hard. Story 38. I was with my ex-girlfriend for 3 years in my late 20s. We had just returned from a wonderful week-long vacation, and in hindsight, she hid her feelings extremely well. 2 days later, she broke up with me out of the blue, saying she needed to find herself with her individuality. A few days later, I found out she had been cheating on me with a very close friend of mine. After that, I never spoke to either of them again. Story 39. Among many things, the worst was he accused me of cheating on him with my essayer and proceeded to try and guilt trip / win me back with a puppy that he wouldn't let me have while we were still together. F you, Phil. ETA. I never told anyone what he did outside of my grandmother because she wouldn't shut up about wanting me to get back together with him. We broke up over a decade ago, but the comments agreeing that Phil should go F himself are low-key healing some of my unaddressed trauma over that bit of my life. Thank you all, and keep them coming. Story 40. I was 18 years old and was not on speaking terms with my family. I moved in with my boyfriend, and a month later, there was a knock at the door. It was a young woman asking for my boyfriend. I made myself scarce and went into the kitchen, trying not to be jealous. She yells, "Do you know I'm pregnant?" to him, punch to the gut. I still went on to marry and have a child with him before realizing what an awful situation I'd gotten myself into. Seriously, parents who bail on their kids at 18 suck. Left to my own devices, I had no trusted confidant or friends to give me sound advice. I wouldn't wish circumstances like that on anyone. Story 41. A quick 2-week relationship. I met a girl online, and later that day she told me she's overdosing while drinking. I made sure she's okay and called the ambulance to her address after messaging her friends on Facebook when she went quiet. She was fine, but upset at me. We met that weekend. Next week, she did it again, plus cutting twat into her thigh, all because I mentioned I watch adult films. Luckily, her sister was in her apartment because she went into critical condition. I split up with her a few days later because she didn't want me to meet up with old school friends who I haven't seen in 5 years. Most chaotic month I've ever had. She was 19 and I was 21. Story 42. After an 8-year relationship and planning to live together, she moved into her own room in the house where I had been living. The next day, she brought another man over to sleep with in that room. The night after that, another, different guy. It seemed like I was the only guy who never slept with her in that room. Story 43. Ex invited me to a party. Unbeknownst to me, his new GF was there and he had told everyone in attendance, including her, that I was his psycho ex-girlfriend. Needless to say, I was not his ex-anything. I was madly in love and no one told me. We were together for 5 years. My heart just shattered on impact. It was a major before and after moment that shaped my life. I am so much stronger now, but I have lost the ability to love with my whole heart. Story 44. He ghosted me. I really didn't think people did that when they were in a whole butt relationship, but apparently, yep, they do. One day he texted me, "Good morning," and then I didn't hear from him again until 3 weeks later, when I finally got a single response to all my unanswered texts and phone calls, where he told me he thought he was doing me a kindness, and that I would just hate him and move on. I mean, I guess it worked, but it took me like a year to really move on because doing it like that was so massively traumatic. But yes, what a kindness. Story 45. He talked me into giving up my awesome apartment that I stupidly let him move into once his lease ended to move to another town with him. We couldn't really afford the new apartment. He needed my name on the lease to even get it. His mom was not disabled or incompetent, just a very scared, pitiful little woman who wouldn't work or live alone. So she moved in with us. I took care of her, cooked and cleaned. He came home from work one day talking about his work wife, and I asked if it would be an issue. He said of course not. Then he increasingly started being a loser. 4 months later, he told me I needed to find a new place to live. When I went to get my things and my cats, he had his mom guarding him like I was some crazy person. It felt so unbelievable and disrespectful after our years together. I felt like I was being disposed of without a care in the world. He packed my stuff and his mom kept some of my things. I just wanted away so badly at that point, I didn't bother with it. I found a little apartment in my hometown, and he moved his work wife in and married her. He strung me along on an engagement for a long time. I'm still single, and very happy with it, honestly. Story 46. I was so in love, and so was he, for exactly a year. Then, he was totally different. Never seemed happy to see me, be around me. No more goofing and teasing. He didn't really think about me. No more little trinkets of affection, no random texts. He was not communicating what was going on, though I kept asking him what was up. I really thought I had found my person, but I had to let that ship sail before it drowned me. Story 47. The amount of effed up things my ex did to me, I could write a book. This one is definitely on the podium. My ex tried renting me out to his buddies without my knowledge or consent. 3 of his friends. They paid $75 to $150 each. Imagine my horror when I'm in bed watching YouTube and his best friend comes into the bedroom and starts casually stripping. Imagine my even bigger horror after I freaked the F out and kicked the friend out. Friend went to my ex and their 2 other friends demanding his money back. I followed behind with a tennis racket screaming at ex's friend to get the heck out of my house. He's still screaming about his $150. I enter the living room and my ex and all their other friends are just standing there, waiting for their turn on me. I guess I was just supposed to go, okay. I'll never forget the straight primal fear that I might have to fight 4 men to get out, but they all walked out after getting their refunds. My ex rationalized it by telling me that if I really loved him, I'd do anything for him, and he needed bill/beer money. Story 48. Oh, I got this. The worst thing that happened to me in a relationship was walking in on my wife, that is my wife's, lifeless body. She passed away in the night after being home from spinal surgery. Wednesday was surgery, home Friday afternoon, dead Monday morning. It still has me all effed up in various ways 4 years later. Story 49. My ex and I got into an argument because I trusted her to go out with her friends for some drinks without me, because I had to get up for work the next day. She got so worked up that she tried to hit me with a phone book. We'd been dating for over a year and she'd never done anything like that before. I had been trying to figure out what kind of engagement ring to buy. Instead, I broke up with her. Haven't dated anyone since. Story 50. My ex's mother had some kind of intestinal problem, and according to my ex, she couldn't hold in her farts. On the way back from a party in a closed car, it was too cold outside to open the windows, and her mom started farting nonstop. My ex kept yelling, "Don't hold it in, Mom! Don't do it!" while I was in the front seat, wishing I could disappear. True story, I swear to God. Story 51. She said yes to my proposal. Not because she actually wanted to be with me, but because she thought getting married was something she was supposed to do. I.e., that's what people do, go to school, grow up, get married. Other women her age were married already. She didn't want to be the only one not good enough to have a husband, etc. So trying to make a good marriage with someone who doesn't actually want to be with you is a special kind of hell. It's okay though. After 24 years, she finally came clean and admitted she did not want to be with me and filed for a divorce. Nicest thing she ever did. Story 52. Physically abusive ex beat the crap out of me when I was pregnant. I'm glad I got out before he unalived me. The day I finally left him after he beat me up really badly, 2 black eyes. My eyes were like totally red because of burst blood vessels. Even looking back at the picture I took is horrible. But yeah, I finally was like, F this. And so his reaction to breaking up with me was to take his grandpa's rifle and shoot himself in the stomach. He came back stumbling in from where he did it outside in the woods, and I called 911 for him. He wasn't in the hospital for long and was okay. I often go back to that though, like he could have very easily shot and unalived me and my son. I was like 6 months pregnant when that happened. I honestly don't doubt he thought about it. He's an effing psycho. Story 53. The worst thing that ever happened to me in a relationship was when I discovered that my partner had been living a double life for 2 years. They had another partner in a different city, and neither of us knew about the other. The truth came out when he accidentally sent me a text meant for her, asking if I was okay after our fight, a fight that never happened with me. Confronting them and realizing how deep the deception went was like watching my entire world fall apart in an instant. Story 54. My partner of over a decade had to confess to me that he had gotten a barely 18-year-old girl pregnant. and he was dang near 30 years old. He only confessed because she already had the baby and he already had the paternity test done, which confirmed he was the father, and he was going to have to start paying child support. So that means not only was he cheating on me, but he obviously wasn't using protection. It's a miracle that I never caught an STD. It was truly one of the most shocking moments of my life when he confessed. I didn't cry or scream at him. I was just stunned. He then tried to convince me that this could potentially be a good thing. It would kind of be like we had our own kid, except it wouldn't be anything like having our own kid. This kid has a mother that isn't me and wouldn't even be living with us the vast majority of the time. We separated for several months, but because of how long we had been together, all of our shared experiences, memories, and history, I was stupid and gave him a second chance to see if we could salvage the relationship. He became very verbally and emotionally abusive once we were back together, and I found out he was still cheating on me. I had never been the type of person to snoop through my partner's things, but I became that paranoid, who was constantly going through his phone, computer, work bag, pants pockets, etc. That's how I found out that the cheating had been going on for years and with many different girls. There were red flags looking back in hindsight, but hindsight is 20/20, of course. I finally ended things for good due to the cheating, knowing he would never stop cheating. The fact that we would have this child in our lives that was the result of him cheating, the emotional abuse, and some other really effed up stuff that happened. When I was packing my stuff to leave, he begged me not to go and had the audacity to say that he couldn't believe that I was throwing our relationship away. He didn't care about our relationship. He just wanted someone to pay half his bills, clean the house, run errands, and take care of the pets. I'm thankful I finally left. Story 55. I found out that the day he proposed to me, he had sent an email to his ex-girlfriend, who cheated on him with his best friend, that he still loved her, would always love her, and still thought of her daily. We had just started applying for a mortgage to buy a house together. 5 years of my life down the drain. When I called him on it, he didn't even have the balls to tell me the truth. Said she had faked the email to screw with him. Stupid mother ever had forgotten we shared a computer. Story 56. 1. Slammed my head into the vehicle door. 2. Didn't understand the concept of enthusiastic consent. 3. Got mad because he didn't consent to me taking pictures of him after he told me he would like me to take more pictures of him. 4. Leered at other women and told me to dress like other women. 5. Would try to get me to have relations with him when I said I didn't want to. And the list goes on and on. He was just a pathetic mess of a man, and as a young autistic person, I didn't understand that our relationship was not okay, and that the people around me helped egg it on even when I needed help. Story 57. Not a relationship like that, but a friendship of 10 years down the drain. Friendship breakups are so weird, honestly. Imagine being best friends with somebody since y'all were kids, and then you realize as an adult that your so-called best friend doesn't know so much about you, but you know every little thing about them because she is so self-absorbed and you're her designated listener without even realizing. She even had the nerve to tell me that I don't talk that much. That was because whenever I did speak about something, she would always turn the conversation back to her. I gave her the benefit of it until I opened up to her and she immediately turned the conversation back to her. Mind you, I would listen and talk about her goals, problems, and everything in between for hours, and she couldn't even listen to me for a few minutes. I don't think I can ever recover from that kind of betrayal. It's such a weird feeling. That wasn't even the worst part, honestly. But anyways, y'all don't let anyone dim your light and never settle for friendships that drain you. Story 58. Background. I had my first boyfriend at 14 to 15 years old. He was 15 to 16. AOC in my country is 16. He was an abusive POS. The worst stuff he did was after we broke up. Firstly, he canceled a meetup with me last minute. I found out he canceled meeting me to meet my childhood best friend. He then broke up with me and immediately started dating her. I found out they hooked up through a mutual friend. They split up about 3 weeks after getting together. So he got back in touch with me. I still loved him and believed all the nice things he said. So we hooked up. When he got what he wanted, he got nasty with me again. I told him I missed my period and he accused me of lying. I went for an abortion. He refused to come at first. I needed a guardian figure, 18 plus, so I asked someone I was friendly with. It was another dude. I trusted him and he was very supportive. X found out and accused me of trying to make him jealous. He said he'd come with me, but I needed to find a different guardian. Just before the abortion, he said we could start fresh once I went through with it. After, he said he didn't want to be with me anymore because it was too much. I cut him off. Finally, I won't lie, I had loudly badmouthed him to anyone who would listen. I really didn't care anymore. He got back in touch months later and tried to make amends. His new GF, Edit, a different girl to the one he initially left me for had recently broken up with him, and I felt bad. He then found out the reason his GF had broken up with him was because she found out how he had treated me. He told me to tell her everything I said about him was a lie. So yeah, F that dude. Story 59. When I first broke up with my ex-girlfriend, it was at school on a bench. I told her, I don't think we should be together. She got immediately heated and defensive, asking why, over and over again. Then, when I went to the library with my best friend, I saw her throw her phone on the library's wall. That should have been a huge red flag, but I was 13. Not even 30 minutes later, she manipulated me into getting back with her, and I agreed right on the spot. The worst day of my life. Story 60. Probably him holding me down on my bed and breaking my nose and repeatedly punching me until my lower teeth went through my lip, giving me a permanent scar. Or being strangled on my birthday and thinking he was going to unalive me? Both of those were pretty bad. Or finding out my next boyfriend was cheating on me our whole relationship with a 19-year-old while he was 34. That was super icky and effed up too. I don't know, probably not as bad as the physical crap with the last one, but emotional abuse is so painful too. Story 61. My first husband, we were early 20s, told me he had been giving his younger brother some relations for years and blamed it on him being essayed by his older stepbrother when he was very young, and it caused him to grow up confused. He was already pretty manipulative and terrible person, so this was my out. It might make me a bad person to not stick around to see him through therapy, but I had other things to heal from. I couldn't babysit a sick person on top of what he had created between my ears. Story 62. My ex and I planned a whole summer vacation 4 months in advance. We were very excited, especially me since that was going to be my first time traveling. On the very first day of our vacation, he got a phone call from a lady offering him a summer job. She asked him if he had any summer plans, and without hesitation he blurted out, "No!" and took the job. I was livid because clearly he didn't take me or how I felt into account. When I tried talking to him about it, he pretty much said, "There's always next summer." I decided to break up with him and went back to work the next day after being given a month off for living my dream. Story 63. I found out he had watched some gross stuff of 12-year-old boys and liked it over the past 7 years. When I asked him how many times it happened, he repeated the number I threw out. He minimized it, tried to act like it was more normal because the children were 12 and not 4, and that adult people can be attracted to teenagers, that he watched it because his adult films addiction escalated and he watched more awful stuff until he found this. It effed me up for a long time. Still not over it. I hate him for doing it just as much as I hate him for trying to minimize it and making excuses. I'm still confused if he was born like this or if his adult films addiction led him to it. Story 64. He was convinced that I had bulimia and went to my parents to convince them before ever confronting me. I denied it because it wasn't true, but no one believed me. He threatened to leave me if I didn't admit it and made me explain and recount certain events in the past where he thought I threw up after I ate. He gaslit me so bad that I even second-guessed myself. I was young and didn't want to lose him, so I considered just going along with it so it would all stop and we could go back to normal. To this day, I am traumatized that people don't believe me about things, and I need concrete evidence, cameras, paper trails, witnesses to back me up because my word just isn't good enough. Story 65. I found out an ex had a friend one summer when I was out of town. Later found out it was more than that. Someone shared emails showing they talked crap about me all the time. They were so close people thought we broke up. When I got back in town, she was too busy doing something with them to get together with me. We had been together almost 2 years at that point. It was so blatant even my dad commented that it was effed up, and he never paid attention to that kind of crap. I had to wait. I was young and lacked enough self-respect to walk away. I waited and spent the next few months pretending everything was fine. I did the old, what am I doing wrong shtick. I wasn't perfect, but don't treat me like some a-hole. I was mad at her for years. As I got older, I've been more mad at myself for taking it. That said, she was terrible and I didn't deserve to be treated like that. It's not a very juicy or exciting example, but it effed me up for a while. Story 66. Oh, I've got a great one. I had just deployed to Afghanistan in the army during the surge. I called her after a week on Skype and I heard she was in an airport from the background noise. Asked her where she was going casually and she told me, "I'm flying to see this guy I met so I can see if I can not have relations with him and know what we have is real." It took me a second to process that sentence. I told her, "Not getting on the plane would be your indicator, and if you're in a place with this relationship that you need to do this, then I'll make it easier for you and just break up with you. Good luck with that." And I hung up with her and blocked her on everything. She would send me emails detailing how great it was and how much better he was than me, and I'd just keep blocking emails. Within about a month or so, she was emailing me from different accounts again, apologizing and wanting to explain and get back together. Apparently, the guy 3 states over with the fiance and the toddler at home did not in fact turn out to be the right choice. The amount of effort she put out reduced over time. It took a few years. It's been a couple years now since she's tried to reach out to me. No need to say sorry. I know I dodged an intercontinental ballistic missile right there. Story 67. Reconnected with a guy I'd known as a kid. I was told he and his wife were coming to the end of a lengthy divorce. It became official. He added his name to my existing lease and we upgraded to a bigger apartment. He'd spend the weekend at his parents' where he'd have his time with his 3 kids. We'd moved fast, but I agreed with meeting the kids at a slower pace. Between being gone a night here and there as a truck driver, he was at the apartment 3 to 4 nights a week. We started talking about getting a house together and visited a couple open houses. Finally, one day I opened up a piece of his mail, which ended up being a bank loan, stuff in regards to the house he and his wife had just purchased. Crap hit the fan, and over a speakerphone conversation he told me he didn't know me, and I was crazy for saying we'd lived together. It was like the Twilight Zone. I've been through some doozies, but that was my first early 20s dumb as F relationship mistake. Story 68. We were having some issues regarding relations, and it was a huge insecurity for me. But I was trying really hard and working on it, and then she told me she was having issues being attracted to me. So I spent that night crying on the couch through the night, and apparently my crying woke her up. So she walks over and asks me, "What's wrong?" And I tell her, and she goes, "I thought we already talked about that." So I say, "Yeah, but I'm still really upset." So she says, "Okay, well, you're being loud," and proceeds to shut the door and go back to sleep while I'm still in the middle of a full-blown breakdown. Story 69. After 11 years and 2 kids, I got a text message breaking up with me. Spent the next month and a half trying to fix my/our problems, only to slowly find out through friends and my own snooping that she was talking/probably cheating on me with a guy she knew from high school. All the while, she toyed with my emotions and strung me along for some effed up reason. Then she finally grew balls and moved out into his house. Still denies to this day that she cheated and won't even admit to cheating. To make it worse, she even did some of the cheating while I was out of town at my grandma's funeral. Story 70. My mom just told me she was in hospice for stage 4 invasive lobular carcinoma. I called my GF in tears explaining what it means, and she started to cry and proceeded to tell me that she just had relations with her ex and was sorry. 10 minutes later, looking at the ceiling, wondering how this could be and how 2 people I love are gone to me. Mom lived, never quit smoking or drinking, and I'm estranged now. I broke up with that dumb female dog as well. Needless to say, love is a passing emotion, and wherever you put it may not exist in the future. So F them bridges and burn any that lead to your castle you don't want. Story 71. I came out of work one day and he had just moved me and my son into his home that was mid-renovation, no flooring, bare drywall, just in bad shape. Turns out he needed money to finish it, and that was me. I go into shock, do the best I can. Then he spent the next 3 months going bat crap crazy. Turns out he had no teeth, pulled them all 6 years prior because teeth lead to health issues. So he wore full dentures at 40. Surprise! He talked to Jesus, saw Mary in the bathroom tiles, became convinced that I was cheating on him with everyone, including my own son. So gross. Wouldn't let me in the front yard, wouldn't let me walk the road, wouldn't let me open windows or doors. I couldn't go anywhere without him. I had my work desk in the living room, cameras everywhere. My son wasn't allowed upstairs. I wasn't allowed upstairs. He said if my son tried to take him, he'd walk away with no legs. But that's not a threat, sure. Called me awful names, would scream at me for an hour if I looked out the car windows or made eye contact with a man in public. He would take my debit and credit cards for thousands of dollars in home renovations and purchases that I did not agree to, but apparently he needed to see my buy-in. Made me pay for everything. Extremely verbal. As say, he didn't hit me but threw things and punched walls by my head. One day, after 3 months of insanity, with my son and his mom there because it was the only way we'd be safe as we left, we packed up suitcases and left. Moved in with my parents, $50,000 in debt from him, with severe anxiety and PTSD as well. I went to file police reports and found out that nothing he did was illegal because he didn't physically lock me inside, and apparently I could have left at any point. And yeah, I could have, but I was frozen. He made it so I was completely broke, took my credit score from 790 to 570 in less than 2 months, so I couldn't even rent an apartment. He laughed when I cried about that. I told him I couldn't leave because of that, and he laughed some more. I didn't want to move in with my parents, who thought he was great because he would be so sweet around them, and the second they turned their back, he'd call me a loser. Why I get the lemon in my family, being with you, is so effing embarrassing, but God told me I have to do it, so yeah. Still living with my parents at 47 years old, trying to rebuild my life from the negatives. I knew him and was in love with him for 2 years before the move, and in that 2 years and 3 months, he almost ruined my life. I'm honestly thinking about writing a book, but I don't know who'd want to read something so awful. Don't ignore the red flags, people! And there's your book title. These stories are so hard to read, I'll be honest with you, just because it's so sad and you know that it's not going to end well for these people, so all you can do is just keep on going and hope maybe they're doing better now. Love you guys. Story 73. When I told him my parents are silently uncomfortable around LGBT stuff, he started screaming at me and throwing stuff. He said my parents are the exact same as people on the other side of the world who behead people for being gay. Bro, my parents are just awkward around it because they aren't used to it. It was supposed to lead into a funny story about the mall or something that I can't even remember now. Like being approached by some pride group and them being very confused and awkward because they have no clue half the stuff he's saying. They just had a rainbow bracelets their grandkids made them on or something. Story 74. We got into a big fight and broke up. I told her that she disgusted me and I never wanted to see her again. An hour later, her boss called me and said she hadn't shown up to work. And did I know where she was at? Her mom called later that night and said she couldn't find her. The next morning, I went to her house, but she wasn't there. Her car was found in the woods later that day, a hose running from the tailpipe to the front driver's side with duct tape covering the windows. Story 75. She broke up with me at a concert after having me drive her family, and the guy she had been cheating with me at the time to said concert. I knew something was up, but I did not comprehend the full extent of the crap until I saw him kiss her neck during the performance. My ex's sister was genuinely a good person and pulled me aside and told me all the crap that my ex wouldn't. In essence, she broke up with me for my ex. Looking back, there were a million red flags. She would randomly forget her phone at home overnight, get random texts from dudes she worked with, and just an overall air of crappiness. She kept me close underfoot and didn't allow me to really see my friends. And I certainly wasn't allowed to have any female friends, went through my phone all the time, checked my Facebook messages, etc. It was just awful. The real kicker is that she had everyone fooled except my dad, who is one of the purest, kindest people, but he just absolutely did not trust her. After it all happened, I was pretty effed up for a couple of years. During that time, I engaged in some pretty self-destructive behaviors, avoided some decent relationship opportunities because I legitimately thought every woman would cheat on me eventually. I eventually ended up dating my wife, who showed me how to love and trust again. So thankful for her. But I still have dreams fairly often where I'm dating my ex, and throughout the entire dream, I'm piecing together that she is no longer my girlfriend, and that I'm actually married. Story 76. I was involved in a drive-by shooting where I watched someone die and another get shot in the legs. 2 weeks later, my fiancé dumped me for a girl he met on Facebook. He said, "You aren't acting right, and I don't understand why you're in bed all the time now." Best part was a few months later, after I finally had the strength to do life again, he dumped her and tried getting back together with me. He said, "Well, you're acting like your old self again." Story 77. Had a flight back home from visiting my family, arriving home on my 21st birthday. Had been with my ex-partner for about 2 years, living together for over a year. I had planned to be home on my birthday so we could be together for it and celebrate. So I land around noon and call him to come pick me up from the airport, looking forward to seeing him. I hadn't heard from him all day despite letting him know I'm boarding, when I'll arrive, no delays, etc. Then, when I call, he doesn't pick up. Phone is off or dead. I call again and again. Text, no response. I end up calling my best friend and having her pick me up at the airport, then waiting over 5 hours at her house before hearing anything at all from him. I later find out that according to his story, dude had gone out the night before, gotten so wasted he couldn't find the keys to our apartment and tried to kick the door down, splintering our door frame. Had the cops called on him because he scared the crap out of our 70-plus-year-old neighbor, who had lived in the apartment next to us for over 20 years, somehow was not arrested. The cops helped him find his keys. Also found out that while I was gone, he had brought random guys he met at the bar, still not sure about this, over and was smoking cigarettes with them inside the apartment. Did nothing for my birthday, no gifts, no card, barely acknowledged it, and no dinner. I was like, okay, you actually just hate me. Should have just left then, but it was the beginning of the inevitable death spiral to the end. Many other similarly awful things proceeded in the following months before we untangled ourselves from each other, but this one stung pretty bad. Story 78. 6 years of emotional and physical abuse because of her issues with alcohol. She is one of those people who, as soon as alcohol graces their lips, she's an absolute monster. Immediate mood change, literally after the first sip, and even looked physically different in her face. Think Luane Platter's mom from King of the Hill. The perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's such a long time to be with someone, so when I finally kicked her out, I was completely lost, but felt liberated. Finally restarted my life at 34 and doing very well, though my attempts at relationships since have been fruitless. I chalk it up to being more sensitive to red flags, which is good, because I'm absolutely terrible at ending relationships, but it has made me overly hesitant to allow myself to be vulnerable in the first place. Probably ruined a good opportunity over just not wanting to let someone in, but it is what it is. I'm content with my life now. Story 79. Drugged me with some drugs and sold some of my sentimental possessions for drugs. I was 18 and he was just constantly trying to get me to do some with him. I was constantly trying to save him. So he just decided to drug me instead. Only happened once as far as I'm aware, but it was horrible. And the way he acted when I found out. Did manage to get my possessions back from the drug dealer because he had a conscience and didn't want to take something that had emotional value to someone else. Did this story just end with the drug dealer being the good guy in the end? And also, like all these, so sorry that happened. Like, these are just so awful. Story 80. I was living with my girlfriend of over a year and she just didn't come home one night and wouldn't answer her phone. I thought she got in an accident or something, but she was cheating on me with a former friend of mine. When she got home the next morning, she acted like I was the crazy one for wondering where she was and saying she needed space. We broke up the next day and she started dating the other guy less than a week later. Story 81. While I was changing clothes in front of him at night before going to bed, he takes his phone out and starts taking some photos. I start screaming and he just laughs. I made him delete those pics in front of me. I just hope he didn't manage to save them in a secret folder or something, but he didn't have enough time, so I'm pretty sure he didn't. And before deleting them, I looked at him and I looked at his face. I look shocked and you can see in my eyes how in panic I am, like it's not funny at all. He then told me I just don't understand his sense of humor. Story 82. Cheated on me with one of our friends, tried to push me out of our company by scheming with our other partners. She ended up diagnosed with BPD, a wonderful condition in which it's almost guaranteed the person will never take responsibility for anything because they can't stand anything that hurts their ego. An effing nightmare. That was 15 years ago. I thank my luck to not have had kids with her. Today, I'm with the love of my life, and the happiest I've ever been. Story 83. I was in a relationship with M, and met T at a friend's party. T and I agreed that this was just a friendship. One day, T was in town. All of us went to a few shops but lost track of each other, and T and I were left, so I texted M that T and I were going to a meetup place. M found us and accused me of liking T more than him. I was heartbroken that he was so angry, and luckily my friend T was sleeping over at my house, so I thought, at least I have a friend with me. But T SA'd me that night. I passed out and woke up to a Facebook update saying M changed his relationship status from in a relationship to single. Story 84. I was the happiest I'd ever been in a relationship. We adored each other, were perfectly intimate in every physical and mental sense possible. I had never felt more open, myself, readily vulnerable, trusting. My children loved him. He took them on as if they were his own. I felt myself healing from the abusive marriage I had escaped from a couple of years prior. He asked me to marry him, and although I thought I would never marry again, I was thrilled to say yes. Our relationship was beautiful. All the time I heard people complimenting how happy we were and genuinely thought I had found my soulmate. A few months later, I would find out that he had been having an affair with his ex-wife for a majority of our relationship. I was completely blindsided. He was with her the week before he proposed. The week after, they were together when I was bringing their adult daughter to the hospital with COVID, while I sat with her for hours by myself because he said he really needed to get the side job done that he was at. It devastated me, ruined me. I don't think I'll ever be the same. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore. I can only look out for me and my littles, never allowing anyone else that close ever again. Story 85. My spouse of 10 years had a midlife crisis. Instead of buying a convertible or something, he chose to cheat on me months after I gave birth to our second son. She was half his age and barely 21. He left me for her. I was trying to survive the early days with an infant and a toddler in tow. Needless to say, I was blindsided, but wait, there's more. While I was reeling from what just happened, he made his rounds with all our friends and family with some BS story, ultimately trying to convince them this was somehow my fault. He didn't want to look like the bad guy. I honestly don't know if I believe in any sort of romantic love anymore. Story 86. I dated a younger man for 10 years. He was 20 years younger, 25 and 45 when we met. We had a great relationship, except that his mother hated me. She had plans for him to marry and have kids, and he didn't want that, and he couldn't with me. She did everything she could to break us up for 10 years. I finally had enough of her and broke it off. She was too much. It was never going to change. It was devastating, but I'm happier without her in my life. Story 87. She cheated on me with a group of guys I was palling around with for about a year and a half. I didn't even find out until after we had a mutual breakup. I was down at the bars one night like a month after, and the whole group of guys basically socially ambushed me and started taunting me into doing something stupid. She didn't even apologize when I confronted her about it. She just gave me some BS excuse that she was chasing stupid urges. I was an emotional rock who could shrug off anything, but that happened in 2019 and I'm still dealing with some insecurity and anxiety issues from it. Don't cheat on people, y'all. It's a very effed up thing to do to someone. Even if you hate them with all your guts, I wouldn't wish my experience on my worst enemy. Story 88. After 7 years of trying, 19 to 26, catching him over 50 lies, he broke up with me for the 5th time. After we got back together for the 3rd time, I asked to hold off on relations until we felt emotionally safe. I knew he was still being dishonest, and I wanted some time to feel like I could be safe with him and trust him. He agreed, but I caught him one night at a motel. He lied for months about what he was doing there. We went to watch Netflix on his laptop and searches for workers came up. He still denied seeking these relationship workers. A couple of months later, he finally came clean that he was out there to have a relationship with one of these workers and film it and send me the video as punishment. Said he thought I might end myself, but that wasn't enough to deter him from going out there, and that really hurt. He swears he never followed through, but many parts of his story weren't adding up, so I questioned him for a week. He didn't like that, so he dumped me. We got back together a month later, and he was still lying about many things. So I didn't trust his good behavior, even though he sobbed, begging me to believe him. He dumped me a day after, talking about the house we wanted to buy and the kids we wanted to have, because listening to a priest made him feel like I was emotionally safe to be with. He blocked me off everything. Story 89. Yes, it takes two to tango, but hear me out. My ex was controlling and had a very high relation drive, more than anyone I've met, and she sulked if she didn't get it. Remember, this is because it's foreboding, blinding by what I thought was love. I met her through work, and she knew I had 2 children already and was in a relationship already. However, I was deeply unhappy at home and had been for years. She offered something fresh. She appreciated me and wasn't selfish. However, it soon dawned on me that she was controlling and sat with me all of the time. If I went to make a cup of tea, she would follow me. I wrapped a birthday present and she rewrapped it. Red flags, I know. I had already booked an appointment for a vasectomy before the relationship, and towards the end of the relationship, the booking was coming up fast. She tried talking me out of it, and I refused. In the end, she directly threatened to stab me if I didn't cancel it, and explained that she had stabbed her ex-husband with a pen. He couldn't have kids. Can you see where this is going yet? She came off the pill without telling me and subsequently fell pregnant. I went to hers and collected my stuff while she was out and left. Blocked her, and the day before I moved house, to play it safe, I came home to find a letter from her. She had driven 2 hours to deliver it, explaining how she thanked me as she got what she wanted. No threats, but it also wasn't polite. I was mentally going in and out of crisis in the weeks leading up to it and spent the next 3 years overdosing and being repeatedly sectioned as I tried to process everything from my past and the pregnancy. I lost my job and contact with anyone and had to start all over. Turns out she is magically back with her ex-husband, same day apparently, and is very happy. She gets a family and I get to pay for said child until the next 13 years. It's been 5 already. From word of mouth, she planned it all along, as it was a free child. No fertility services, plus child maintenance. Her family and his are very rough and are known for violence. I didn't know this until later. I'm just about to start university again to do something I want to do with my career and am so isolated. I'm petrified of her coming back and get nervous of anyone who knocks on the door and do not have identifiable social media. I don't go out unless I need to. I don't trust anyone. So yeah, there is that. This isn't meant to be a woe is me, but an effed me up kind of story. Story 90. We became functioning alcoholics, drinking almost every night. We would get into screaming matches, we stopped having relations, sleep in different rooms, etc. One day I said something that probably warranted being slapped. Memory gets fuzzy after just a couple drinks, and she slapped me. Told myself that things had become physical, and that I needed to remove myself from the situation. This was around 5 or 6 a.m. in Colorado. I packed a quarter of my things and drove back to my home state, Texas, because I had nowhere else to go. I left clothes, furniture, my job, and my emotional support animal who had been with me across the country. I still have snow tires on my car, but I can't afford new ones, and my ex won't even attempt to send me my stuff. Story 91. Hard to say, couple of things come to mind. A, the time I had to break up with myself after a 2-year relationship because she slow ghosted me. She just stopped answering the phone or calling me. I had to call her at work to get her to answer and name a time and place for my own demise. And even then, she couldn't say the words and I had to break up with myself. B, the time I found out she was still seeing her ex for 6 months behind my back. Getting lied to over such a long period of time really F's with your concept of what people are capable of. What was great about this one was she cheated on me and I broke up with her, and they had the gall to stalk me for like 2 years trying to get me back and trying to ruin any future relationship. I was like, did you want me or not? You can't have them both. Story 92. He dumped me over the phone on what was supposed to be our 10-year anniversary after having promised me he wanted to try to work through the damage he'd inflicted the week prior. This was after I had supported him through a cancer diagnosis and treatment through COVID, among other significant life events. He blindsided me by saying he'd be interested in a polyamorous triad with the person he insisted wasn't a threat to our relationship. A few months prior, I had communicated to him that I was feeling insecure about and replaced by that person. He insisted they were just friends. Suffice to say, they are now dating. Story 93. I lived with an abusive ex for 10 plus years. I had no options to leave. After I was unable to leave her and have my own place, I met another lady. She was what I thought was my best friend, as I have never had female friends. Anyways, we were together for about 6 years, and she tells me she slept with my bandmate twice and now decided that she's gay. She reconnects with an old heroin friend from her teen years, forms a relationship with her, and moved to Arizona. I'm 50 now, as that was a few years ago. I seriously doubt I will find another to share this life with. Story 94. Went to see my girlfriend and saw her grandma walking the neighborhood. Stopped to chat. Gma said she was excited to get pizza at my workplace. I did not work at a pizza place. She thought I was my best friend who worked at a pizza place. This is how I found out that my best friend was dating my girlfriend behind my back. Got rid of them both. Another one said, "Good night," to my girlfriend at the time, and she called me right back on accident, asking for her ex by name. Story 95. Oh, this was fun. We had some plans, but upon texting her, she said she woke up not feeling well and just wanted to take it easy, but to go without her. I, thinking in my infinite wisdom, would prefer to spend time with her even if she was sick, and decided to surprise her. So I went and got her some sick person foods. I pull up, bags in hand, open the door, and she's cuddled up to another man on the couch watching a movie. I don't remember much more than laughing, him leaving, and then doing the same. Story 96. We were planning a wedding, and suddenly, 2 weeks before, he got cold feet. A few days after the wedding was canceled, I found out. He was cheating on me with everyone. Men and women. Screenshots and nudes were sent as confirmation. He was living with another woman in another state while we were planning. And not only was he living a double life, but he was cheating on me with her, and her/me with other random men and women. It's a long story that should be adapted into a movie. Story 97. I have 2 stories, and 2 different exes. One, he cheated on me. Then when I finally had the balls to break it off and stick with my decision after so many attempted fails, he broke into my condo, spray painted female dog on the walls, and then later called me from a blocked phone number and whispered he was on his way to SA me. He's an awful human being to this day, and I only keep track of his whereabouts because he's dangerous. Another ex had a whole wife I didn't know about and had completely lied for 2 years about his family and life. It's a complicated situation to explain, but because of our jobs and both of us living pretty far away from our homes, it took me way too long to discover everything. I've had a lot of therapy and things to work through regarding relationships. Story 98. She caused me to stop talking to my best friend for years. I wanted to make things right with him, but she always discouraged me. 4 years ago, he passed away in a car accident, and every single day, I miss him so effing much. She didn't want me to be at his funeral and kept talking crap about him during the service, while also being jealous of any girl that gave me a hug that day. That was also the day I really realized I needed out from that relationship. I considered it one last gift from my brother. Shame it came down to that. I've moved on from that relationship and I'm finally in a much better place with a person that makes me happy and I'm able to make her happy. I really wish I could share this good life with him. Much love, Pedro. Story 99. Found out my ex was trying to cheat on me with both women and men after claiming to be straight male. I wish I could say this is what caused me to break up with him, but his manipulation in my young age caused me to believe it was a mistake, and he never actually cheated, so it took several months later to officially end the relationship. Also, not sure if this counts, but the worst was probably when I was a teen and found out my closest family member, my cousin, who was only a year younger than me, was catfishing me for over 2+ years and claimed it was because I seemed lonely. But the truth is she was obsessed with me and couldn't bear to share me with another person. So she had to be every important person in my life. We are both women and families, so it was really twisted to find out this info. It really messed up my perspective and trust in relationships for years afterwards. Oh, that is so hard. It's already twisted and messed up, but for it to be your own family? Story 100. Turned on me when we had a child. Picked apart everything I did. Got drunk every night. Regular shouting and trying to force me to leave the baby crying rather than go do it. Telling me I was getting kicks from breastfeeding that I should stop. Shoving me around while holding the baby. Raising his hand to me. Shouting at the baby. I was so vulnerable at the time I tried so hard to do everything right and not aggravate him. On my son's birthday, I was singing too loud, and he told me to stop. Here, I reached my limit. I tore my hair out in clumps and hit myself in the face repeatedly. I had a breakdown, and I left the next day. I'm doing better now. I co-parent with him, and he's improved considerably, but he's still a very difficult man, and this is hard to navigate while shaping a young mind together. Story 101. After 15 years of marriage with 2 kids and spending the last 5 years of the marriage holding down a job and basically being a single father so she could focus on getting a law degree, she cheated on me 6 months after she passed the bar. She then said it was my fault and tried to kick me out of the house I had paid for since I was the only one working for about 90% of the marriage. She then proceeds to get pregnant by somebody else 10 years younger than her while we are still working through the divorce proceedings, basically wiping out all the hard work and sacrifice I put myself through so she could focus on her goals. And she still acts like she didn't do anything wrong. Story 102. I was having chest pain, so she dropped me off at the ER, then refused to pick me back up from the ER because she wanted to sleep for the night. So I had to stay in the lobby of the hospital all night until she woke up in the morning because the ER gave me Vicodin, and I didn't want to use an Uber in the middle of the night while on painkillers. And then the next day I asked if she could make me something for dinner because I was exhausted and emotionally frayed from being in the hospital all night. She gave me 2 greasy microwaved frozen meatballs in between 2 slices of bread, which was so revolting I threw it up and had to make dinner for myself. And then she had the audacity to cry when I expressed I was not very happy with how the past 24 hours had gone. We lived 5 minutes from the hospital, by the way. Story 103. Well, the dumbest thing I ever did was move deep in the mountains with a guy I'd been dating for 3 months. Not quite Alaska-level wilderness, but very dang close. He became very unhealthy, gained a ton of weight, stopped taking care of himself, etc. I was no longer attracted to him whatsoever. When we met, I was drinking a lot and doing a lot of drugs, so that's how our relationship began. It's almost like when I opened my eyes, I was in the middle of nowhere with a guy I didn't even like. He had a very moody personality and had a hard time getting along with anyone. I didn't have the strength to leave, deep codependent issues, low self-esteem, etc. So I spent 3 more years moving around and being miserable. Somehow I found the strength to leave. Finally, probably because he became absolutely unbearable towards the end, and my family hated him. Now, married to the man of my dreams. But boy, do I regret wasting those years with someone I never should have been with. Story 104. Too long didn't read, new apartment, girlfriend dumped me on the day I moved, led to a bunch of BS. I moved into a new apartment that was picked out by me and my GF. She finished her lease in February, but I needed to move by December, so we decided I would just move in first and sign her to the lease after she officially moved in later. This was an apartment closer to where my girlfriend worked by her request. An apartment that was newer, much bigger, and had a spare bedroom, all needing to meet her rigorous standards, which also meant that it was too expensive for me by myself. I moved all my stuff by subway, multiple crosstown trips in big suitcases by myself because she was busy even though she said she would help drive. At the time I was living in Japan with no license. So then I had to rent a van and ask a coworker to drive so I could move the big stuff. She also couldn't help on that morning because of her work. But I got it all done before I went to work. Honestly, all of this was fine. Circumstantial problems are really not that big of a deal to me then, and not that big of a deal to me now. If it wasn't for the fact that when I got off work and raced home to clean up from the move, she showed up with a bag of oranges and broke up with me pretty much right away. Then cried in my arms because she was sad we were breaking up? Like, what? That situation quite literally ruined my life for a bit. Not because of missing her or any bullcrap like that, but the debt I went into trying to get out of that apartment, the stress, the depression, the excessive weight gain. Oh, and did I mention that this was December/February, right before COVID hit, so I literally couldn't move because no apartments in the city were taking foreigners out of fear. Golly. Doing so much better now, but my life would be so very different if it wasn't for her. Maybe better. Hell, maybe worse. I try not to dwell on it. Story 105. My first major relationship. Every small thing I did wrong or right, she blogged about it to all her friends on Tumblr. To this day, I hate couple influencers where the girl has a camera on the guy testing him with stupid logic games all the time or showing off how great he is. It all circles around being half braggadocious, half invasive in my head. I've never gotten it out of my head that with some women, relationships are performative. Things like the soft launch drive me up the wall mad. Like these women are billing themselves as these viewed entities, and this is coming from a young man who grew up wanting to be famous, not sure of what it entails fully. I do have this hate for the way women operate that I need to go to therapy about, though. Story 106. I was in a relationship with a girl. I should have seen the warning signs. She was very emotionally volatile, and we were basically on and off again a few times. She then got pregnant because I was being an idiot. She talked about how we'd move in together. She was excited for our wedding and how she's growing her hair out for it, etc. All this great stuff about starting a family. As soon as she got confirmation from the doctor that she was pregnant, she did a complete 180. She told me she didn't want me involved and that she was doing it all alone. She then started sleeping with a new guy about a week later. I have no idea what's been going on since. Story 107. I am from Hong Kong, so our medical schools were undergraduate entries. Before I sat the public examination, then 19 male told everyone he knew that I was a future doctor. Cringe. When I received my exam grades, it was clear I couldn't meet my medical school conditional offer, so he ghosted me something like a month afterwards. When I finally decided to forfeit this entry to university, take a gap year, and do another round of exams of other systems, it was painful to have someone you thought loves you end up bailing out at your lowest. During the relationship, he kept pursuing me by demolishing my confidence in what I love and constantly pressured me. Then 17-year-old female for relations. And no, he is not a medical student or a doctor, was just some economic student who can't secure any decent internships at major firms in the city. This haunts me to this day, and during my gap year, whenever I see anyone that vaguely looks or has a profile like him, I have a panic attack. Later diagnosed as PTSD as I cannot deal with the constant panic attacks, and had one major mental breakdown, but I'm glad this diagnosis makes me functional again. Story 108. My partner at the time would always comment on the appearance of other women whilst I was present, would say what qualities he liked about them and how much better they were compared to me. He'd go to parties with friends and then come back to see me and tell me about the woman there, how he wanted to sleep with XYZ but couldn't. I don't know why, but I felt like I was stuck and so low that I couldn't do any better, so I dealt with it for a few good years. He also was obsessed with a mutual friend of ours and told people in our mutual friend group how much he wanted to sleep with her. And they, of course, told me. It's taken years of therapy and understanding partners since then to try and accept myself better. Story 109. He would bite me and there would be considerably sized marks in my arms and legs, back and shoulders. I didn't like it and I would cry every time. And he said it must have meant I'm not good enough for him and he probably would have to go cheat to feel fulfilled. Gaslighted me into thinking I wanted it, even though I'd asked him to stop. He'd bite me to wake me up too. Now, I only want a gentle relationship, but I feel like I have to be rough even though I don't like it. Story 110. We dated for about 6 months, and he proceeded to stalk me for the next 7 to 8 years. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since late 2022. In that stalking time, he threatened violence countless times, so many texts and calls even after I blocked him. I was granted multiple restraining orders against him. I had to renew them. He attempted to lure me to a secluded spot to unalive me or himself at least once. I got this in writing. He called the cops on me, got me arrested. I was attempting to leave his place. Followed me from coast to coast. Literally, I moved from east to west and he followed me there and back. There was also the general manipulation, gaslighting, cheating crap that comes with someone that is clearly mentally unwell. He was definitely a sociopath/psychopath. This was all while he honeypotted this poor chick, who I assume is still with him. They had a child together towards the end of his stalking. She'd probably be about 4 years old now. I always assumed this is why he eventually gave up. Oh, that and once I learned they were having a baby together and he was still pulling this crap, I messaged his chick on Facebook. I doubt she ever saw the messages, but it definitely scared him into leaving me the F alone, I think. Time will tell if he resurfaces. Story 111. He was pretty abusive from the start, and I never understood why. To the point I once had a tag in my hat and he started being verbally and physically abusive for how stupid I was for leaving the tag in. It just made no sense why he was so angry, but I felt for him. One day I'm looking at his phone before going out with my girlfriends. There I saw multiple photos of him cross-dressing and advertising himself on Craigslist. This was a Muslim, nearly 7 foot tall, manly guy. I was terrified about catching an STD and that he had hid this, so I confronted him before going out. He starts sobbing. Oh well, I have to go out. While I'm out with friends, he shows up and drags me out of the bar to yell at me. I'm so drunk at this point, I start yelling back. He calls 911 to tell them I threatened to kill him. I get taken to the mental hospital for 24 hours. No clothes, no phone. Later released because they believed it was a domestic dispute, all because I found him cross-dressing. Story 112. Boyfriend cheated on me multiple times. Each time he'd gaslight me into thinking I was crazy or imagining things. The last time I finally had proof, with help from the woman he cheated on me with, who had no idea he was still with me, ended our relationship. He moved out of province and found out a few months later my parents offered to help him out and live in their home. We'd been best friends since 14, dated for 4 after high school, and were looking at engagement rings. Haven't talked to my dad and stepmom in over 7 years. Have an amazing husband and kids now, and I'm happier than ever. As much as it hurt getting backstabbed by my best friend/boyfriend and my own parents, I'm better off without them. Good riddance. Story 113. Getting completely blindsided by the person that I was with for 7 years, lived together for 5, literally 0 warning. Don't get me wrong, our relationship was not perfect, but there is nothing to this day that adequately explains to me how it happened. We talked about children and marriage just a few months before it all went down. Losing someone like that really effed me up in ways I couldn't have imagined. There's part of me that wishes she cheated or something because it would have been much easier to reason about and move on. I have an entirely new emotional perspective on life and a completely different level of empathy after going through it. Even though I didn't believe anyone when they said it, it's true that with time it gets better. I'm still dealing with the fallout of that situation, but it's forced me to grow and I'm grateful for that. Story 114. Well, 6 months in, his car transmission blew up and he wasn't able to replace his vehicle or repair. So he started renting the neighbor's vehicle a couple days a week to get to work and take his daughter to her extracurriculars in school. Then he lost his job. Contract IT work. A few months after that. Then his house was foreclosed a year into the relationship and he states he never received notice. He was unaware of the proceedings. He managed to get a great job about 3 months after the foreclosure and was living at a friend's house, but lost the job at the 6-month probationary mark because the manager he had was terrible and the team was disintegrating. Then the car he was leasing from the neighbor was no longer available/owner decided to retire it. He is still living with a friend, borrows his ex-wife's vehicle to take his daughter to activities, and is unemployed again. Story 115. Around Easter, when COVID was dying off, I went to go see family for Easter out of town. Girlfriend at the time refused to go due to social distancing fears. I went regardless. She decided to F some random dude in our bed, and when I got back, she left me. I had to return an engagement ring a week after. It was an absolute 180-degree turn of events in such a small time. Edit, she moved out a month later and literally took all the furniture and my cat. I slept on the floor for a couple of months before I got back on my feet again. Story 116. Finding the email on our shared laptop about the great weekend she and her paramour had while I was on a business trip, I was shattered. Also, the look on her face when she found out that I found out. She was more upset that her family would find out, not upset that she went outside our marriage. She moved across the country. I'm still really good friends with her family. Edit. Thought it would be good to add I've forgiven her and am at peace with the whole situation, considering I'm in a much better place myself. But it took me a lot, took years, and hope nobody else goes through that sort of thing. Story 117. Not me, but a friend. We were studying for a test, both in college at the time, and he had been arguing with his girlfriend, so they weren't talking for the moment. On the way home from the coffee shop, we were studying, and she texted him that she was pregnant. Turns out she just wanted him to go reserve her campus housing for the next year, and that was the only way she thought he would respond. Story 118. My ex-girlfriend backed me up against a wall with a knife, pressed against my neck because we were arguing that I never helped her around the house. I just finished unloading the dishwasher and had put all the dishes away. She had major bipolar issues she refused to take medication for. 2 months later, nearing the end of our relationship, she cheated on me with our neighbor's kid. He was 17, and we were young at the time, 20. And then she sent me pics. I never went back to our apartment until she was at work the next day, packed up everything and left. Deleted and blocked her and everything. Story 119. Left for 3 other people, including the coworker I was told not to worry about. We were E&M, so I knew about the 2 others, but apparently he decided that how he felt with those 3 others were better than how he felt with me. Too bad, because I was actually enjoying E&M for a bit until that happened, and it took years for me to be okay with it. He said he needed to be E&M to be happy, so I followed along, since we just moved states together monogamously. And when I wasn't okay with E&M before we broke up, he yelled at me, calling me negative and an energy vampire, literally screaming at me, cornering me into a room I was running into, trying to get away from him, so he could continue yelling at me that I'm an energy vampire. Story 120. My most recent ex was a narcissist, but of course I didn't know that until it was too late. He was very hot and cold, on again, off again. Turns out he was doing the same thing with his best friend. He told me not to worry about. She was also my friend. In fact, we were all in a friend group in law school. The fallout from their confession that she was leaving her boyfriend for my ex all happened during my first law school finals. They also both alternated between manipulating me to try and make amends, which I wanted to do because I still had to see them every day in law school, and threatening me if I didn't stop talking to them, which was stupid because they always initiated. He also physically threatened me when I finally cracked and said something mean to them both. I should have reported them to law school, but I was too afraid they'd gang up on me or physically retaliate. I ended up dropping out for health reasons, but never seeing them again was definitely a perk. They deserve each other. She had already been physically and emotionally abusive toward him, and she literally kept their relationship a secret for longer so she could make it hurt me more and ensure I wouldn't stay in touch. Story 121. There was a popular band, major tours, big festivals, etc. we both enjoyed, and we went to see live several times. Unbeknownst to me, my girlfriend somehow slipped her number to the drummer at one of those shows. I didn't find out until months later when they were playing nearby and I suggested we go. She made excuses as to why we shouldn't. A bunch of our mutual friends were going, so I said I would just go with them. She pleaded with me not to go. I didn't understand, but I relented. The week of the show, once she knew I had made other commitments, she miraculously got a free ticket, somehow. Went to the show with all my friends, then ditched them to go backstage and hang out on their tour bus. My friends told me as soon as they got back. She also gaslit me for another 3 months about how I was overreacting, that she was just a fan and I shouldn't be mad at her for having famous friends. I finally had enough of her bullcrap, broke it off with her, and she moved in with him a few weeks later. The band still plays some festivals I attend, but songs I used to love just upset me so much, even 10 years later. Story 122. Getting ghosted. I get it's hard to say and hear, hey, I don't want to continue this, but it feels 10 times crappier for someone to completely vanish on you and get no explanation why, so all you can do is think over and over again about what you could have possibly done to warrant that, or if they ever cared for you at all. Genuinely felt like a piece of trash being thrown away when it happened. Story 124. Sorry, this is long. I invited a guy over to my place that I had known a few years before. We both knew my ex-roommate. I only wanted to hang out, but he made moves. Even after I brushed him off, he continued to make it known each time we hung out that he was very much interested. Eventually, he wore me down, and I decided to give him a chance even though I had not been seeking a relationship with anyone. I opened up, I got more comfortable with him, and everything was going well. Then he started to struggle financially, and I started to help. I had a nice paying tech manager job, my own place, etc. Then found out I was pregnant. As my only child was nearing college age and I was far from being a kid, I decided I wanted to be a mom again, and the guy was super excited. I had already met the family and been to family holidays, etc. But then the pandemic hit. I was cut with a mass layoff, but really good payout, and then pandemic pay. But this also meant my nice loft in the middle of a major city was no longer safe. So I ended my lease early when he asked me to move into his house with him. I started nesting, fixing up the house he had inherited from his late grandmother. I mean, complete reno, because I'm making a home for us and our child. But guy started to change. Didn't want to give up his playroom for the baby in an otherwise one-bedroom house. Started getting upset at renovation changes long after he was gung-ho and helped me implement them. On his phone a lot. Used the pandemic and my pregnancy/eventual baby as an excuse to not seek a job. We lived off my money and savings. When I bought a car, paid cash in full, he drove it. I let him know to seek out a job while using it, which he eventually did. Then, things got worse. He spent more time on his phone, would return from work and ignore me and our son. Even on his days off, he would not help me clean or help with the baby. 24/7 during a pandemic, I took care of my baby with little help and no sleep. He kept pushing for relations while I could barely keep my eyes open. He would get upset when I wasn't up to it. One day, he gave me his phone to look at a meme and a notice from his Instagram DMs popped up. Explicit images and flirting between him and a local woman. Even him stating to her that pics of her down there was his best birthday present ever. And there was confirmation that they had met and had relations recently. At this point, he was driving my car, had lived off/drained my money for over a year, and barely interacted with his son. I confronted him, and the gaslighting got very intense. I wanted to leave, and I was trying to plan out my next steps as an unemployed mom of a baby, so I waited it out. Before I could leave, though, one day he attacked me and beat me and tried to bar me from access to my son in the next room. I fought for my life. I grabbed my child and ran to the bedroom where I had to sit against the door as he tried to kick it in. As he heard me call the police, he fled. I pressed charges, but he couldn't be found. I packed up what I could, blind as my glasses were lost in the struggle, but it was mostly things for my son. I left everything else behind. Fast forward 2 years, and I've started over in another state, restarted my career, and raising my very intelligent son on my own. Because the charges were not pursued by the DA, they were dropped and he didn't get into any trouble. He even illegally packed up the entire house of my things and stored them in 3 different very expensive storage units that I only learned about last year. Since then, I've been paying $1,000 a month for these units as I have not been able to afford to go back to the state and get my things. I haven't been able to save a dime because of this. I eventually got very behind on these and now I owe over $3,000 on these units and about to lose everything all over again. Lost things in a house fire when I was 12, Hurricane Katrina in college, and storage unit theft in 2012, and a car theft. Car full of things too precious to put in the U-Haul during a move a few years later. I'm very tired of losing. Because of this experience, I don't think I will ever date again. Story 125. Right after getting me a wedding dress for my birthday, found out he was cheating on me. He'd sit in front of the apartment after work on a call with his dad for a good hour before coming in, multiple times a week. Found out he also stayed up all night gaming while beating the chick into adult films and chatting with a married ex with kids about how much he wished he could have relations with her, but I was a female dog that never gave him what he wanted. We did have pretty regular relations and I never said no, and I also initiated. But he'd complain that the actual relations were too much work. Guess watching dudes do it together was easier than the real thing. Blessing in disguise since he'd be the world's worst husband, let alone father. Story 126. The worst thing that ever happened to me in a relationship was experiencing a deep sense of betrayal. Trust was shattered when I discovered that my partner had been dishonest about something significant. The pain of realizing that someone you love love and trust could be deceptive was incredibly hard to process. It was a turning point that made me reevaluate not only the relationship but also how I approach trust and vulnerability in general. Healing from that experience took time and taught me a lot about boundaries, self-worth, and the importance of clear communication. Story 127. My ex introduced me to morphine, got me hooked, and used me as a way to make massive stacks on cash. Oh, and she became pregnant and disappeared, not telling me anything about what was going on. Then told me she got an abortion because she said I didn't want it, which was not true in the slightest. But she didn't have an abortion. She had a miscarriage. I found out about a year later. Eventually, she ghosted me unless I was buying pills and almost ended up homeless. Took me a solid 6 years to get healthy again, but now look at me. Story 128. Called my dog a bad dog in a yell because he was a roo-rooing to be let outside. Absolutely effing not. She was hot and successful, but I'll not have my sweetest little pup made to be afraid in his home. Plus, she didn't even try calmly saying no. I was walking to the door to let him out. He was super obedient. He would have listened to no. He was not a very insistent dog. He was shy even. But she did not want to be interrupted, I guess. Story 129. Girlfriend went on to kibitz. Said it was for 3 months and promised to write. Never did and came back 6 to 7 months later and ignored me. I even bought a puppy to take around to show her. Best dog we ever had. Decided to go backpacking to the Middle East to get her out of my system. End up in a shop/bar in the middle of the desert, start talking to a girl behind the counter, and she asks where I'm from, and says there was a girl from there who slept with loads of men 6 months prior. My legs went. She told me her name and it was my ex's name, even got her surname. I decided to go backpacking for another year. She found out, called the night I was leaving and said, "Don't go. I'm in Scotland, but getting the train back now." I was leaving that night at 3:30 a.m., but went to the station as I would have stayed. Her train didn't arrive, and we had no mobile phones then, and I left the airport as I would have missed my flight. Story 130. My mate got married in another country with a childhood friend while we were still together. Funny, because today her new boyfriend here doesn't understand why she doesn't want to marry him. I didn't tell him. One day she showed me a pic of the signing of the wedding book, telling me the bride was her cousin, but thanks to high-def cam, I've enlarged the pic and her name was on the contract as the bride, not the witness. Oh well, after a while she was repentant and asked me to open the door. I didn't, so she managed to break the window with a rock. Maybe she still loves me. Is it proof? Story 131. In the immediate moment, I had a recent 2-month ex trash my apartment and threatened to unalive me when he found out I had started dating someone else. In terms of long-term damage, I learned that not only had the man I had been with for about 3 years been cheating on me basically the entire time, but that many people within our social circle knew about it and had actively helped him cover it up, including telling me that I was being paranoid and possessive when I thought things were sus. That included our roommate, and I was paying all of the rent for all of 3 of us. I had nightmares for about a year after the first one, but all things considered, I got over it pretty quickly. It's been over 20 years since the second, and I'm still unable to put myself in a vulnerable position in any friendship. Story 132. Visited my parents by train. There is a well-known part without coverage, about 45 minutes. Was texting my boyfriend that I would arrive around X and my coverage would be gone now until then. He replied, okay. Then I got back to the coverage part and had like 50 missed calls and a ton of messages. I was seriously worried because I thought there must have been an accident in the family. Lo and behold, they thought I had an accident. My idiot boyfriend couldn't reach me and called my family in panic and lied to them that I was late and the train wasn't there. My whole family went into panic mode. I cleared everything with them and calmed everybody down. Train arrives punctual. He has flowers but doesn't apologize. Instead, he said, I cannot visit my family by train anymore because if he cannot call me, he worries. That was the moment I knew this was over. On my way home the next day, I Googled how to safely detach myself from him and ended it in a very public place. All my friends told me I overreacted. Months later, I found out that he also lied about his STD test results. After that, I was done with the dating game. I was 24 and have happily remained single for 10 years. I only ever attracted creeps and stalkers, and at least as a single, I won't end up as a statistic. Story 133. She punched me in the mouth. I was washing dishes while we were arguing. I'm sure I made some smart comment and she decided that was reason enough to punch me square in the mouth. Broke both top and bottom lip. I put the dish down, went and grabbed some of my things, and walked out of the house as she was begging me not to leave. Story 134. I should have seen it coming because he had been emotionally abusive to me prior, had borderline symptoms, would be super affectionate and romantic on the weekends when I'd see him, and by Monday act like I was dead to him, and would ignore my texts. He is a narcissist and dumped me several times before this. I was pregnant and he ghosted me and went to a party where he got coked out of his mind with his stupid effing friends. Somehow we stayed together after that. I don't know why I didn't run, but he continued to get together and break up even after he was born. He didn't get his head out of his butt until his friends left the picture and he stopped doing coke. He's not the best boyfriend, but has made progress and has grown. He is a great dad. Story 135. My now ex-wife decided she wanted to bring other women into our marriage. I had only been with her ever, so I wasn't real comfortable with it, but let her play. They decided to playfully tie me up and blindfold me, and then things started happening. Next thing I know, my wife whispers in my ear, "That's not me." Took that choice away from me completely. 3 girls later, and now the ex beats me bloody because of a situation with another girl she brought home that I was waiting to tell her about until her final exams were over. She found out, climbed on top of me one night, and beat me mercilessly. Ended up tearing both ears and just left me a bloody mess. We ended up in the kitchen and she looked at the block of knives, and at that point I sprayed her with the nozzle from the sink and she snapped out of it. I started planning my exit that night. Story 136. One day with my ex, we got into a fight. Can't remember about what, but he is an abusive POS and hated my guts. So every day there was something to fight about. It escalated to the point that he put me in handcuffs and I had to no-call/no-show my job for the evening. He kept sitting on our bed, muttering to himself, "What do I do with you? What do I do with you? How do I make sure you can't leave?" As I'm sitting there on the couch in shock, thinking only about how my bladder, and I was hoping I wasn't going to soil myself. I pleaded to use the restroom and he encouraged me to wet myself. I don't remember how I got out of the cuffs and was able to use the restroom. He surely freed me once he was satisfied/bored. Sometimes I forget this ever happened, and when I do remember it, it feels so surreal. He later punched me in the face before I ghosted him and moved states away, but that was much simpler to process than the day he decided to make me a prisoner in my own home. F you, Richard, I wish nothing but hellfire on you for the rest of your miserable life. Story 137. The ex of all exes banged 3 other guys at school, then after staying the night at my house, got into my phone when I was asleep. A former good friend of mine confided in me that she had cheated on her husband with a mutual friend of ours. This girl made a fake Facebook profile and proceeded to inform said former good friend of mine's husband of all the details she had found in my phone when I was sleeping. It caused said former good friend of mine to be kicked out of her house, lose custody of her kids for a while, etc. I was completely blind to the whole thing until the fake account came back to my IP. When I told my ex to get out, I asked her why she did it, exposing the secret affair that had already been nipped in the bud. The only answer she could come up with was that she was bored. She flippantly dismissed the gravity of her egregious misdeeds combined as all in days activities. One of her lovers at school showed up at my door to get her moved into wherever she was going. I didn't know, nor care where. I calmly told him, with more serenity than I thought I had, that she was going to inevitably ruin his life as well. Well, that happened too. Then I found out through the wire that 3 weeks later she went and married some other guy that was living with his mom and feeding her ecstasy and benzos. She got knocked up by him, ended up in jail for domestic violence, and then somehow magically got her daughter back. I have prayed for her daughter so much because a mother like that will only lead to the destruction of her child. That devil was the worst mistake of my life. Conversely, having those experiences proceeded to shake me out of the lifestyle I was in. I'm not sure if I should thank her or curse her. Story 138. I was laying in my ex's bed, thinking he was just pooping, since it was 30 minutes or so. He walks to the door frame with tears running down and proceeds to tell me how for the past 30 minutes, he was just thinking of chugging a bottle of vodka and offing himself. Yeah, safe to say I got extremely clingy because I was afraid he was going to unalive himself if I wasn't in the same room as him. He proceeded to dump me a few months later, and the attachment I developed to him due to that moment left me extremely depressed for 2 years. Constantly blaming myself and that it's all my fault things ended when he really was just using me as a mental band-aid, and when that wore off, he left me. Story 139. My first relationship was great. We got along well. It was my first experience, not theirs though, and I kept getting these offers. Hey, why don't you try something with my friend? And eventually was persuaded to try a threesome, which I found I disliked. They cheated with multiple others. I learned some of the red flags, got back into the dating pool after a few years. Another partner, another cheat. I can do one more try, right? Yep, another partner, another cheat. Twice more, 2 more cheats. I'm ignoring some red flags where there's something about my personality that attracts this, right? Or something. I have to be doing something wrong. I just don't know what it is. It's cheaper and less of a burden on my emotions to have intimate relationships, even if it does cost to my self-worth to apparently be a cheap magnet and not someone that can be truly loved or appreciated. I think that as I was raised in a somewhat abusive situation, I must be looking for that in a partner or putting off hurt me vibes or something. I suppose I should be glad I've been able to walk away and not end up like Ariel Castro's victims, chained up in some old guy's basement. It's been hours since this was posted. Nobody's going to read this or care, but I suppose it's nice to vent once in a while. I just wish I knew what the heck I was doing that's keeping me from finding any sort of companionship. Wish I knew what my defect was, you know? Story 140. Honestly, I consider it a positive thing that I had to scroll for a bit before I found an answer that wasn't cheating or crappy breakup, because I expected a lot more. He tried to unalive me with a pickaxe but missed and hit the ground next to me instead and only didn't try again because my preteen kids intervened. Or he accidentally killed 2 of our pets, then poisoned my child's dog when he found out I was filing for divorce. Or she cheated on me with multiple people, then accused my grandfather of drugging her and holding her hostage, then accused multiple friends of mine of SA, and finally ran away with the husband of a mentally ill woman who subsequently ended herself when she found out my ex was pregnant. All of which are real relationship stories that have happened to people I know and love. This list of stories was probably out of order for this guy then, because these have all been pretty rough so far. Story 141. A past boyfriend was quite verbally abusive and constantly berated me to lose weight. Since apparently 140 pounds was too heavy for a girl of my height, 5'6", eventually he broke me down, and I agreed to be put on a diet that he regulated. A month later, I had dropped about 20 pounds, and I was, in his opinion, improving. I'll add that this was all due to the fact that I was on a daily intake of 500 calories. Think mainly only salads and water as meals. I was weak, pale, and all the while maintaining 3 jobs while he worked 1 part-time gig. Ended up being put into a hospital for dehydration and exhaustion after I passed out at work. Thankfully, I got wise and left his egotistical butt. Never again have I let someone demean me so much. Like a lot of these, unfortunately, they're way too common. But you know what? Listen to me, alright? If you're in a relationship and they're trying to change your body, get out. Hey, you, listen to this? You're perfect. Story 142. My girlfriend at the time was staying at my house one night, and her ex-husband got drunk with his buddies and they decided to pay us a visit. He kicked in my front door, my bedroom door, threw my phone through the wall, verbally assaulted us both, then physically assaulted me. I didn't have a gun then, but I successfully defended myself against him. His 2 friends only got involved when they saw it wasn't going his way, so they pulled him away and peeled out. Once he sobered up, he turned himself in and spent the next week in jail. He was charged with B&E, vandalism, and assault, and was credited with time served, placed on a year probation, and ordered to pay for the damages, which totaled around $3,000. 3 months later, she broke up with me and went back to him. Story 143. Check my comment history for more details, but introducing me to the guy she'd been sleeping with the next night, and when I asked why she would do that, her answer was, I just wanted everybody I cared about to be together before this all went down. Sorry, you're right. Bonus, she thought she was very emotionally intelligent. I guess that's nothing compared to people getting cheated on by their decade-long spouses, but it was extremely crappy. And the reason it took me so long to even consider another relationship is because 12 years ago, I also got left for just a friend. Too many flimsy people in this world to consider putting trust in anyone. It's disheartening. Story 144. Went through a wedding after a 7-year relationship. Then after a few days, she said, JK, I've fallen out of love with you, and I'm leaving across the country for a job. Interestingly, it was a destination wedding. So far back, it was in my parents' country, and therefore there was no real divorce, since no marriage certificate was filed. Tried to salvage that relationship, going to therapy, etc., but made the unfortunate mistake, though when going through it all, I thought it would be the only hope of getting back together, of continuing to live together until she finally moved out. The moment I realized the relationship was never going to be repaired, I happened to be on the phone with my mom and just sobbed into the phone. Have never cried like that. Took a while to get over the sheer fragility of romantic relationships since there was no big argument, fight, or issue, but probably just a death by 1,000 cuts. A learning experience for sure. Story 145. He didn't really cheat, but was paying women online for nudes. After 5.5 years of relationship where I, 22-year-old female, was financially supporting him, 35-year-old male, for the bulk of it, including buying him a used motorcycle which he dropped, co-signing on a Harley which got repoed after we broke up, and where our relations were dead in the bedroom and he refused to get another job after the contract for the job my dad got him expired. Not to mention years of emotional manipulation, including bawling like a giant hairy baby when I broke up with him. I have a lot more stories. 6 years later, I'm still paying off debt I took on to support us, and the dang near repo is still on my credit report. Okay, so one, I know she's making fun of him for crying as a man, giant hairy baby. Hey guys, look, it's okay to cry. But in this instance, in this circumstances, yeah, he's a freaking baby. Let's shame him. But two, yeah, he did cheat. You know what? If you're gonna go and pay other women for some explicit images, I think that's too far in my book. But hey, you made it out and you're going strong. Sorry that it sucked for as long as it did. Like all of these, I would comment on every freaking story that just how bad I feel, but they're all just heartbreaking and hard to read. So, hope everyone's on the up and up, you know? Story 146. My ex cheated on me with my boss, and then left me for her, while she was still my boss. He gaslit me the whole time about it, while she dropped very nasty, taunting comments whenever she thought she could be subtle about it, like talking about an actor that was filming in our facility when we both said he was attractive. Yeah, you know, we have similar taste in men. It was a very painful 5 months until she left for another job. It ended up being overall a positive thing because it took me to my rock bottom, from which I was able to rebound and focus hard on improving myself and my circumstances. I got to an amazing place mentally and physically, and when I felt good about dating again, the next man I met was my husband. My ex and boss are still together 7 years later, so obviously it was a better situation for both of them overall, but I still stand by the fact that it was one of the most degrading and dehumanizing things I've ever experienced. Story 147. We got together when we were kids. We were in the same class. One day, a very vague thing, believe me, it's very, very dumb, happened and she left me for no good reason and without closure. She was in front of me in the same class, being closer to other people. This thing shattered me so much, I started having mental health issues, like daydreaming about her, talking to her even when she's not around. Later, when we turned 18, we again got together for a few years. And it was like this would last forever. It was so real and lovely. I really miss her. So when we again got together, I told her how she left me without any apology or good reason or any closure or even cared to discuss about it later, and how it got my mental health messed up. I was the kind of guy who didn't believe in mental health care and all. She told me that she's sorry for whatever happened. It was not a convincing sorry, it was more of a, yeah, get past that thing kind of sorry. She didn't want to talk about it and how it affected me for years, seeing her in front of me and still ignoring. I don't know if I was delusional or something, but apart from this thing, we both had a good time together. I explained to her that if she ever wanted to leave me or something happens, please give this thing a good end, with reason and probably a closure. And I'd be doing fine, and she also agreed to this, that it's supposed to be this way if it ever ends. Okay, great. Later at 22, she left me again, for a very vague reason. Abandoned me. Didn't give any reason, any closure, literally nothing. I don't even know what my fault was. This is not the worst part. The worst part is that after first separation, I explicitly told her how to end this properly if it ever happens, how bad it would affect me if she did it the wrong way. But she did it the exact same way like before, even after begging her not to. So now, the character I developed as a kid of talking to her in her absence kicked in, and I basically live in the time when we were kids. The first time she left me, I don't know what happened, but after that, she comes to my mind every single day, 2 times, first thing in the morning and before going to bed, from age 14 to 22, every single day till today. Story 148. Let me think. He isolated me from everyone and everything, handed in my resignation for me, and manipulated my circumstances so I was forced to live out of my car for almost a full year. It was not a big car to begin with, and there was even less space with all my worldly possessions in there. He let me do his laundry through the days in order to be inside in the warm through winter, and clean the house, and I would take change from his pockets to eat, but I frequently went without food, and couldn't drive anywhere because I had no money for fuel. He lived with his mother and was scared to ask about me moving in, so coming in through the days when she was at work to do his chores was all I could expect. When his car broke down, he started taking mine and ran up fines, picked up friends, etc. Very embarrassing for me. He would return with someone sitting on my underwear. And when I got done with that, I said I needed my car. He punished me with no food, no coming into the warm, no acknowledgement for over a week. I used to use a tap at the local park in the early hours of the morning when it was empty to brush my teeth, as I wasn't able to be inside each day, and when I did, I would get in and sneak a shower, then wash the towel with his laundry so no one would know. He didn't want me showering because the extra water bill would make it obvious and his mom would be angry. He took friends out to eat once and I begged to come. He made me promise that I wouldn't ask for food because he had promised them a meal but couldn't afford one for me too, and didn't want to look bad. I promised, but when he was done and there was still a lot of food left on his plate, I took one of the fries. After we left, he lost it at me for making him look bad. Anyway, yay, drama. I was 20 and he was my first boyfriend. It all snuck up on me. I had no idea how bad it was at the time. Some of these choices I thought were mine or thought were my fault. I left when it started to get physical in terms of him actually being physically dangerous to me beyond controlling food and clothes, like hurting me. He tried to unalive his brother's ex and I was like, nope, I'm out. And then I had to very slowly get him to dump me. It took me months to work up to demanding he keep his promise to get his stuff out of my car, and he dumped me for that. It was a tool bag, too heavy for me to lift, and he'd been promising for about 4 months, and I never pushed it. After the breakup, he faked his own death, and when that didn't work, set up a trap for me. Story 149. We were 17, and I was in a shared accommodation for kids in care when I got groomed and assaulted by a staff member. I didn't tell anyone at the time, but 2 to 3 months after we broke up, I got with my current partner. Someone who lived with me, who I've cut off now, told him, and he started calling and emailing and texting and harassing me about it, threatening me, putting me down for being in care, using all vulnerable things about me to put me down. I had to tell my current partner what happened at the house with the staff member to him, but he was really supportive. My ex threatened to travel miles and miles to my house and tell the staff about what happened, so I told them before he could. This started 2 police investigations. 1, the staff member, and 2, my ex harassing me. He also harassed my partner, my friends, and made his friends message me. This was 2 years ago, and he still occasionally messaged me on random numbers to flex how he's living. Police closed the harassment case with no further action, but when he most recently texted me from abroad, police said I can get a restraining order if he does it one more time. Story 150. I dated a narcissist for 11 months, but he masked it extremely well, so it took a while for me to realize it. But once the facade crumbled, he became a completely different person. The lengths he would go to spin me in dizzy, incomprehensible circles, it was nuts. He was an alcoholic, a compulsive liar, and had a crazy temper. He love-bombed like a pro. He would embellish everything and was so slippery when I tried calling him out on anything, saying, "I don't even know what gaslighting means," over and over again after I gave him the definition of it was the absolute pinnacle of his gaslighting. Saying, "I don't even know what gaslighting means," over and over again after I gave him the definition of it was the absolute pinnacle of his gaslighting. That man couldn't see reason if it hit him over the head. I really only lived with a couple of months of this before figuring out what was going on, partially and thanks to a friend who was finishing her psych major and could put all of his behavior pieces together and see it all as one picture. I'm glad I got out as unscathed as I did, but I definitely still carry emotional residue from it. Story 151. Married 10 years. I was a good husband and faithful. She was my first and only kiss and everything else. She cheated on me many times, and in our last year of marriage, she suggested we try opening it up. In every effort to save my marriage, I went along with it, but it was miserable. We spent $10,000 on therapy and coaching only for her to continue to deceive me and to lie to me every step along the way with no regard to my safety. Finally, in the end, she found the person she wanted to leave me for and left me. Ethically, in her mind, We're still working on the details of the divorce. Pretty effed up that she's entitled to half of everything. Story 152. My ex called me 3 hours before she was supposed to land for our shared vacation to tell me she needs a break indefinitely. This is right after I have a huge falling out with close friends because I took her side in an argument. I chased her for a month to fix things because I believed there was a misunderstanding in how I handled the friends in her argument. We continued talking and texting as if we were fine for a month before she agreed that I could visit her. I flew 12 hours to her, only picked up late from the airport with her unshowered. She made some excuse how she had last-minute home repairs, so we needed to talk it out then and there, and she dumped me back at the airport within 6 hours of picking me up, and I had to wait another 6 hours for my flight out. She couldn't even give me the time of day. I don't know what she expected from me during the relationship. She said she was hurt that I didn't prioritize her. However I did it, it was all wrong. Also, mind you, this person co-owned a house with me and we had plans to get engaged soon. Talked about rings, potential venues, etc. Story 153. I was left to die. I dated this guy for 4 years before this happened, and he had always been very kind to me. I've told very few people about this in detail. For context, I have epilepsy. I had a bad seizure and was in the ICU on life support for about a month after I seized in my sleep. He left me overnight, went to work, and only called 911 when he got home because his mother had come over and found me. He was going to leave me to die. When I woke up in the ICU, he had already moved on and was dating another girl. He took the security deposit I sent him as we were about to get a new apartment together. He instead moved in with her. He threw my license and legal paperwork away when he moved. An accident? Maybe. Because I had no legal address anymore. I couldn't get a new license right away, and because I didn't have a license, I couldn't get the paperwork, and because I had neither, I had nowhere to go on top of being physically unable to work. It took a while to get enough proof sent in to reclaim my identity. I had to relearn how to walk, speak, and eat. I have vision loss in my right eye as well. I've moved on, and I've forgiven him for everything. I am mostly seizure-free and fortunate enough to have my freedom and health back. I have a good job with good people. I drive and even live alone. I believe they are now married and have 2 children together. I guess it worked out for them. I'm glad. I'd be much more upset if it had been a waste for us all. I love the person I am now, though, for what my journey has taught me. I am, for obvious reasons, not very trusting now, though. The emotional strength on this woman, oh my gosh. It's commendable and impressive. I mean, what she went through. I wish I had just had a fraction of that. But alas, that is the final story, guys. I know that was hard to get through. Hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone here that wrote is doing better. And don't let this deter you from finding love. You know, it's out there, but also be very wary because there are a lot of crappy people in this world. Stay safe!